Take a look at this stretch of open-pit mining terrain near Kryvyi Rih in central Ukraine, a place locals have nicknamed Ukrainian Mars because of the rust-colored earth torn up by more than a century of iron mining. Beneath ground like this across the country sits something far rarer than iron. Ukraine holds deposits of 22 of the 34 minerals the European Union classifies as critical. Roughly 5% of the entire world's known critical mineral reserves, including some of the largest untapped lithium and uranium deposits on the continent. In April 2025, after months of tense negotiations and one now infamous shouting match in the Oval Office, the United States and Ukraine signed a deal giving America preferential access to develop exactly these resources. Almost 2 years later, Ukraine still does not have a single commercially operating rare earth mine. So what is actually buried beneath Ukraine, and why, even with a signed deal and billions on the table, has almost nothing come out of the ground? What's actually confirmed beneath Ukraine? Ukraine's mineral inventory reads like a checklist for the entire modern economy. The country holds one of Europe's largest lithium reserves, estimated at around 500,000 tons, roughly 3% of the world's known lithium supply, alongside major deposits of titanium, where Ukraine already accounts for about 7% of global production, along with graphite, uranium, beryllium, and rare earth elements, including some of the largest known reserves of scandium on Earth, a metal used in aerospace alloys. Ukraine also holds Europe's largest uranium reserves, a resource growing more valuable by the year as nuclear power expands to meet surging data center demand. Before the full-scale invasion in 2022, Ukraine was already a meaningful global supplier of iron ore and other raw materials, with export routes running through Black Sea ports that the war has since disrupted or cut off entirely. On paper, this is one of the most mineral-rich countries in Europe. In practice, mining analysts confirm Ukraine currently has no commercially operating rare earth mine of any kind. Soviet geologists mapped it, then the map went dark. Much of what the world knows about Ukraine's mineral wealth doesn't come from recent exploration at all. It comes from Soviet-era geological surveys conducted 30 to 60 years ago, using instruments and techniques that are decades out of date by modern standards. The former head of Ukraine's own geological survey has publicly stated that no modern evaluation of the country's rare earth reserves currently exists. For decades after Ukrainian independence in 1991, the Soviet data simply sat in archives, uncatalogued and largely inaccessible, an entire country's mineral potential effectively frozen in outdated paperwork. It took a full-scale war to finally force the issue. Ukraine is now working with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development to digitize that entire Soviet-era archive, roughly 60,000 books, journals, and technical documents, into a single searchable database, essentially rebuilding the geological map of the country from scratch using data that predates the internet. Why this ground is so mineral-rich? The reason Ukraine holds this much mineral wealth comes down to geology far older than any war. Much of central and eastern Ukraine sits on top of the Ukrainian Shield, an exposed section of the ancient Precambrian continental crust, rock up to 3.6 billion years old that has remained geologically stable for an almost unimaginable stretch of time. Shield regions like this one, similar in age and structure to parts of Canada and South Africa, are exactly where the planet tends to concentrate metals like iron, titanium, and rare earth elements, since ancient volcanic and metamorphic processes had billions of years to slowly separate and pool these materials into mineable deposits, all while the rock above eroded away just enough to bring them within reach of modern drilling. A deal born out of war, not peace. The path to the 2025 agreement was anything but smooth. Talks began in February 2025 at the Munich Security Conference, with U.S. officials describing the arrangement as a potential long-term security shield for Ukraine, tying continued American support directly to future mineral development. Negotiations nearly collapsed entirely after a tense Oval Office meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky that same month. By April 30th, 2025, a revised deal was finally signed in Washington, giving the United States preferential rights to new mineral development licenses while explicitly confirming that Ukraine retains full ownership of its own subsoil resources and final say over what gets mined and where. The problem the deal can't fix. Here is the issue no signature can solve. Independent estimates suggest roughly a quarter of Ukraine's known lithium deposits sit inside Russian-occupied territory, including sites in the Donetsk and Zaporizhia regions, completely inaccessible to any Ukrainian or American company for as long as the front line holds where it currently sits. Even the deposits Kiev does control, such as the Shevchenkivsky and Polokivsky sites in the central Kirovohrad region, largely exist as petalite ore, a lithium-bearing rock that is significantly more complex and expensive to process than the spodumene ore mined in major lithium-producing countries like Australia and Chile. Bringing any of these sites into production would require hundreds of millions of dollars in investment, years of permitting and construction, and a level of physical security no insurer is currently willing to underwrite in an active war zone. Where things actually stand, as of early 2026, Ukraine has begun restarting core drilling, planned to resume in January, focused specifically on what geologists call ore occurrences, sites identified decades ago in the old Soviet surveys but never confirmed as commercially viable, covering titanium, uranium, germanium, graphite, tungsten, vanadium, and tantalum. It is a deliberately modest first step, driven by limited funding rather than the sweeping industrial build-out the original deal implied. Congress has continued moving related legislation forward, and both governments continue describing the arrangement as a long-term foundation for reconstruction, rather than something that produces revenue this year or even this decade. So the mineral wealth beneath Ukraine sits exactly where it has sat for billions of years, locked inside some of the oldest, most stable rock on the planet, mapped first by Soviet surveyors, rediscovered by American and Ukrainian officials negotiating in the middle of a war, and now waiting on digitized archives, restarted drill rigs, and a front line that has yet to move in any direction that matters. The deal exists. The minerals are real and confirmed. What's missing is the one thing no mining contract has ever been able to guarantee: enough peace and enough time for anyone to actually start digging. If you want to see more of this, please like and subscribe.